Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. This is the Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey.
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, we're back again with Bergman and Hitchcock, and we're just trying to get the right key so we can unlock the door to Notorious.
I'm sorry to intrude on this tender scene. I knew her before you did, loved her before you did. I wasn't as lucky as you. I'll take care of her myself.
No, not that way.
I stood looking at her when she was asleep. I could have...
Quiet, Alex. You are almost as impetuous as before your wedding. You barred me from that episode. Let me arrange this one.
Before we get into keys, Pete, can I, this is a really important topical point for this conversation. What is up with the font for the title screen?
Oh, God. What is up with the font, Andy?
There's nothing thrilling or psychologically terrorizing or horrifying about it. It is a bubbly, happy, like a rom-com font. What is
it's
up?
tilting. It's like tilting toward you, and maybe they thought that was threatening. Maybe it's just
like
a tilt.
ghosts?
It's ghost. It's ghost, but it's not even a notorious ghost. This is decidedly the font of a friendly ghost. It's terrible. It's terrible.
I mean, this film, we're going to talk a lot about the movie, but I just had to start it off by like, what is that? Why?
Yeah, why would they do that?
Are they starting like this?
And at the risk of, just lampooning this terrible, terrible choice of fonts, what do you think in your best and most scholarly approach to titling? Why would they have done this? I mean, do you have a perspective that you can share?
Why would they have chosen this font?
Yes. Why would they have chosen?
There
do you have
are
a
always
guess?
eras for new fonts. Every font had a starting point. Maybe this was the starting point for this font, and Hitchcock said, "Oh, that looks lovely."
That just gave you an opportunity to do Hitchcock again.
You
Welcome
did.
back, Hitch.
This is probably why we've avoided doing Hitchcock for so long, so we don't have to torture people with my Hitchcock impersonations. Oh my goodness!
Well,
anyway,
I will tell you this is gonna actually make you very excited. You can acquire the Notorious font from dafont.com, and it's called appropriately Notorious. And it is available free for personal use. So if you want to write like Notorious, you can do it thanks to dafont.com.
That always makes me skeptical of the font when they call it the name that it is probably known for, because I doubt when they use the font in the movie that it was called Notorious.
No. And in fact,
let's use it this font because it's called the same as our movie title. Wow, what are the odds?
Well, and you can even tell it's not quite the font. It's close, but it's not quite it because, probably copyrights and stuff, but it's approximate and funny.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the tilt. That's what bugs me, because what you really want is the friendly Notorious tilt.
You do need that, but it's a tricky tilt because every word is going to have its own tilt. So the left end of the word is tilting to the left, and the right end of the word is tilting to the right. So it's got that looming quality.
Yes,
and that's going to require every letter to kind of change a little bit. We're spending way too much time talking about
one
the
does
font.
not loom lightly. No, let me tell you the problem. I think the reason that the font is so shocking and so shockingly stupid in this movie is because the movie is so good. Would you agree?
The movie is so good.
I love this movie. I had a blast watching this movie.
I have, as you know, Pete, I have been going through all of Hitchcock's sound films from his British period all the way up to moving to Hollywood. And I slowed down just so I could time it with these two Ingrid Bergman films so that I could watch them with this series as we were doing it. And I have to say, this is, I think, the 22nd film that I've watched of Hitchcock's in, recent months. And by far, this is my favorite. I feel like this is Hitchcock really clicking into what makes him kind of the Hitchcock that he's going to become. There is this psychological element to the characters that is really interesting and tortured and fascinating, the way that they play off of each other. There is real smart and a solid understanding of the way to play with his camera and really do some interesting things to kind of help tell his story. The darkness, the humor, everything blended perfectly to make what I think so far is, Hitchcock's best film up to this point.
Which is so surprising, especially coming off of last week and how I was not spellbound by that film.
I see what you did there.
Do you see what I did? I think this is going to be a conversation that might be full of them. I was not keen on it, and it was such a surprise to sit down and look at how what this film resolved in terms of that threatening Hitchcockness, right? The suspenseful Hitchcockness that I have, like you said, this is what he becomes. The way it sets up the story so beautifully in such a short span of screen time and leads us right into the banal day-to-day of our principal character as she's pouring drinks for her buddies, and we meet the mysterious stranger. All of that is just fantastic for me. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, you're talking about the introduction of Ingrid Bergman, who is so perfect in this film, to Cary Grant, who is the mysterious Devlin. And what an introduction. The fact that Hitchcock introduces him by showing us a silhouette basically of the back of him, the back of his head at this party. And we don't hear from him. There's no sense that this is our leading man. It's so brilliantly executed because it kind of creates this shadowy figure that becomes a key part of her life. It's beautifully done and very intriguing the way that he chooses to do it, because it's not what you would expect for kind of a typical leading man at the time. The fact that we are introduced to him through the back of his head speaks to kind of the way that Hitchcock would work with his actors to create these moments that allowed for, not the Hollywood norm. And I think that this is the sort of thing that Hitchcock would become known for, that allowed, that actors would be excited to work with him because he would make these choices. And this, Hitchcock is notorious for kind of being very, I don't want to say dictatorial, but he had a vision and he stuck to it. And, I think there were times when that made it more difficult for certain actors than other times. I think in this particular case, he found the right team of actors to work with that made everything play to everybody's advantage.
Let's start with our opening title sequence, because once we get through all of the opening credits, the litany of opening credits, we get to an opening title screen that just gives us essentially a date and time plate. What's the significance of that?
It's an odd thing, and it really is interesting when you kind of evaluate exactly what they're doing and why. It's designed not in the 1.33 to 1 aspect ratio, the typical film aspect ratio. It's actually brought in as if it's old newsreel footage, and you kind of have that kind of much smaller frame that's kind of soft around the edges, and then we slowly push into it. But so it's designed already to kind of have a newsish sort of feel to it, but then it gives us some very specific dates, which is Hitchcock certainly would employ that later in his films, and it's a technique that other filmmakers have played around with. We've talked about Brazil on the show. Terry Gilliam kind of throws that into Brazil, which is really fun, tea time, whatever it is. Here we have Miami, Florida, 3:20 p.m., April 24th, 1946. This is letting the audience know, we are very current to the time that this is being released. This movie is released August 1946. April 1946 is kind of a big moment because the Nuremberg trials are just getting underway. And this is, the end of World War II. And here we are starting to process what's been going on and dealing with these wartime criminals and actually putting them through trials to figure out kind of the levels of guilt for all the people involved on the side of the Nazis. And this is putting this story right in the middle of that, which works really well in context of a story about Nazi wartime criminals kind of hiding away from Germany.
Totally. And it's one of the things I find most interesting is how we open on such an incredibly timely and important and significant function, right? A trial of Nazis in 1946. And all we get is, from the back of their heads in this courtroom shot through a door. And I love the framing of that shot, right? And otherwise, the significance of that is essentially wiped away, right? It is, we move so quickly into the story of the daughter of Bergman in this case, that I find that such an interesting thing, the way he is, and really deftly able to get us to stop caring immediately about the trial part, about the potential war crimes part, about the stuff that immediately comes to mind when you think about the significance of this time, this period, and move straight into something else, the socialite, the how normal life is for her as she's pouring drinks for people. I find that a expert turn.
Not only that, but it gives us a really interesting psychological study of a person whose life has really been turned upside down by all of this tumult that has just been thrust into it. Here she was kind of I don't know. I get the sense that she was a little bit of a already kind of with her father. It felt kind of debutantes. She seemed like a lady about town type of person until her father, and she knows her father is up to no good. But she, as we kind of get that conversation later when we hear the recording from Devlin, is that she was against her father, and that's the reason they come to her, because they believe that she can play into the Nazis' hands while also being on the side of the Americans. But we get this sense that this is a broken woman, and she seems very well-to-do. But at this party already, and this is the beginning of the film, she has this just complexity. And there is something going on about this party, but she's, really dark and sullen because of what's going on with her father. And there's so much going on with her through so much of this film. I think we've had some really terrific Ingrid Bergman performances so far, but wow, what she does here, the way she plays this character, it is really complex and really interesting to watch her kind of go through the motions of this film.
Well, it's fascinatingly, and it's a performance that feels like she was meant to play it,
Yeah.
And the fact that it's just everything was right here. Her age, her accent, her demeanor, her just the way she's able to interact with Cary Grant, both sort of professionally, socially, romantically. I had no questions at all about their relationship together in terms of that age difference we've been talking about with her and some of her other leading men. That for me was just ancient history. What a difference a year makes. This was such an incredible performance compared to where we have come from.
Yeah, and Spellbound, she was fine in Spellbound. Like I think that she delivered a really interesting performance for a role that they didn't always write to the possible strengths they could have with that role, which made it more frustrating. This one, I think, is much more on par with what she delivered in Gaslight, where it was a really complex role of a woman who's trying to work through this situation and understand exactly what's going on. Very much similar here, but she kind of knows what's going on, but she's frustrated by this situation. She has to basically wed this former Nazi friend of her father's so that she can basically work for the U.S. government and give them the information that they need. Meanwhile, dealing with this feeling of love that she has for Devlin and finding him to, for some reason, all of a sudden being very distant and everything. It's just so complex. And there's there's a step up for Hitchcock, I think, going to a level that it still is fun, but there's a level of kind of this adult psychology that he's exploring in a much stronger way in this film. And I think it's a marked point from here forward that we're going to see in a lot more of his films. I think before there was a lot more, I don't want to say black and white, I don't think that's right, but the way that the characters were written was a little more narrow focused, which is fine. You get interesting characters still, but I don't think they had as much kind of interesting kind of psychological layers to them.
I think to that point specifically, I think it was surprising to me just how believably petty they were in terms of their romantic attraction to one another in this movie. Does that make sense? Does that relate? Do you relate to that statement?
I'm not sure of the petty part. What do you mean?
Well, the fact that they had this relationship that they both knew there was an attraction, a romantic attraction, and yet they weren't able to sort of be honest with one another about it, as she, talks about other men and how you can add him to the list of my playthings, adding all of this. It just sounded very much like what people would say if they were in that situation and didn't know how to talk to one another. It wasn't particularly cinematic. It was high school pettiness that we are all capable of when we are in relationships and we don't know how to talk. And I actually found myself, rather than there's a real chance that you could watch this and think this is ridiculous, let's be adults. But for some reason, Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman pull that off in a way that I find not only believable, but really kind of charming, and the way it resolves satisfying.
Well, and I totally agree. There is, and I get what you're saying now. And what I think is so interesting is because it's Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman at this point in their careers, where they're very popular, very successful actors, it makes for real heartbreak and real kind of frustration as they're going through these moments, and that they love each other, and but they keep closing these doors, or they keep throwing these digs at each other because of the complexity of the situation that they're unfortunately stuck in, and it hurts. I don't know. It hurt my heart as they would say these things to each other. I'm like, no, you don't really feel that. Don't do that. But and that's why I find it such an interesting film, because these are people who really, there's clearly something about them that works. And I think the casting obviously helps, and finding these people to work so well together is critical. But because they are such big actors, when they're having these issues, and they're people that we love so much, it really, I bought into everything, and it made all of the emotion that much stronger for me throughout.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Now, there were some things that are particularly 1946-ish.
Yeah, we've got a moment early in the film when she's drunk and she's driving drunk. He kind of lets her. This is at the party. They're out driving, and she's driving like kind of a maniac. And he stops her after. Well, a cop pulls them over and everything. And he's trying to get her. He's trying to take over as the driver and stuff. And it's a little physically abusive. It's not exactly a good scene. Granted, he's in the right, trying to prevent the drunk woman from driving anymore, but still, basically beating her to get her out of the seat. It's a little much to take. That was a hard moment to watch. As he
karate chops her fingers to get them off of the steering wheel, that was the low point for me. When she started fighting back, I didn't get the feeling that he was actively trying to harm her. It felt much more like a restraint situation, but the way it was just it felt 1946-y, where that was still okay. I don't know. I didn't believe that was that would have necessarily have been a natural character move for him. It felt like a cultural move of the era.
That's I suppose that's a good way to describe it. It does feel cultural and something that people, again, she's drunk. He's finally, putting a stop to it and everything. I get it. But still, it feels rough. It feels rough in today's eyes.
Gross. Yeah. It's gross.
Yeah.
We've got to talk about subjective camera in this thing. And because I want to bring it up now, particularly because I don't want to let this out of my head. The first POV shot of the film, I think, after we leave court, is when they're driving, and it cuts to a shot of her perspective as she's driving. And Hitchcock, he's so smart. He actually has her hair occluding the camera. And I think that is brilliant because the next shot is a reverse shot on her through the dashboard. And you see her hair is right blowing in her eyes. And then we cut back and we're looking through the windshield and we're in that POV mode again. There's hair and it's blowing in front of the camera. That's genius. When does that happen, Andy? When does that happen? I ask you.
Well, it's better than cat butt POVs, I guess.
I'm so glad
Which
you brought
listeners
that
of
up
the Saturday
this weekend.
Matinee
Yes.
will certainly understand that one. You know,
Yes.
it's well, and not only that, but I love that it actually becomes a point of conversation as she's like, "Oh, where did all this fog come from?" Before she realizes that is her own hair. It's a great moment. And Hitchcock, we talked about POV in the last film. Obviously, it was a key part of that film. But here we get it again. And what a nice kind of shift going to this, where it's just a director who's becoming even more assured as he continues exploring with his cinematic tools. In this case, after she wakes up from that night of drunkenness and she sees Devlin in the doorway, and he walks in and everything is askew. And as he kind of continues approaching her and passing her, the camera does this weird shift until all of a sudden he's upside down. Really fascinating way to kind of portray that. I loved that Hitchcock was allowing himself that freedom to move the camera like that.
Well, and this is one of those beautiful things where that camera became such a part of identity of the character it was representing, right? I mean, I think that's part of the benefit of starting us off with that POV camera looking through her hair and the fog, because it gives us that sense that camera really is her. It's not just what she's seeing, it is her. And that personification changes the way we see it next time. It changes the way when it's not so funny, when we're actually seeing something through her face that's dizzying, we actually are experiencing what she's experiencing, not just seeing what she's seeing. And I think that's a subtle difference, but it's all the difference in how it gives us that emotional impact on the film. What do you think?
Yeah, you're talking specifically about the poisoning.
Yes. So let's talk about the poisoning then.
Yeah, it's great the way that, just speaking to the POV, yeah, I think you're right. It continuing that subjective camera as we are really in Alicia's head as she's now being poisoned by her Nazi husband and his creepy mother. It's really it's a trick we've seen in cinema time and time again when somebody is, and in fact we talked about it on the Saturday Matinee show, that the different types of POV camera work and how there is this, the POV of somebody who is affected by something, whether it's drugs or alcohol or getting knocked on the head or dizziness or whatever it may be. This is a good example of kind of the poisoning where everything is kind of blurry and kind of out of focus and everything. But you're right. We've seen her POV enough throughout this film where we're getting a really good sense that when we're kind of in that mode with that camera, that we are feeling kind of Alicia's perspective. And it allows us to really identify even that much more with this character.
So let's talk a little bit more about the story and how it plays out, because it's a little bit of a different kind of Hitchcock story. If you're thinking about Hitchcock and you think of Hitchcock as the, Psycho movie, that's sort of the horror thriller. This is not that film. This is very much, I think you could call it a political or suspense thriller.
Oh, absolutely. And what's interesting about this particular suspense thriller is this is portraying the American government literally like right after the end of World War II in a way that is, I think, more complex than perhaps the United States government would have liked to have been portrayed. This is portraying them as a government that it's not just the rah, let's go fight the Nazis and win and John Wayne, everything is all stars and stripes, sort of hunky-dory sort of thing. This is a much more adult, complex, adult political thriller where the good guys are basically convincing this woman to, they're using her. They pretty much force her, I guess you could say, into this situation where she has to marry this Nazi. It is very kind of, we're not in the black and white world anymore. It's very gray as to the methodologies behind our government as they go through this plotting and planning to uncover this uranium plot. It's such a Hitchcock MacGuffin, this whole uranium ore plot, that what's going on with these wine bottles. It just felt so Hitchcockian when that came up as to what's actually in the bottles. But yeah, I found it to be like, this is 1946. This is like right after everything, the Nuremberg trials are going on. And here we have this situation where, the United States government, it's not necessarily just the good guys. There is some complexity to these decisions they're making. Really interesting, I think.
It's a movie that says, what happened after the war? It got more complicated. The world got more complicated. And we're going to demonstrate that through the course of the relationships of these people and what we ask of each other to do as a function of, supporting our country and the lengths that we will go and the costs of those lengths, I think are apparent here. That, to me, is the cultural statement of this movie. It's not so much about, I think your point about the MacGuffin of the ore is great. Like, who cares about the ore? What we really care about is what he has asked her and the American government has asked her to do. And when I say ask, I mean blackmailed, right? I mean, this is this is that story, and it is told through I think much greater subtlety than certainly Hitchcock to date.
It's a really interesting exploration of this dark story, and I am really happy to see that it came out the way it did, especially because it began in such a potentially disruptive process, because this was originally a Selznick production, just
and
like Spellbound before it.
That the movies of Selznick and Hitchcock in particular are not controversial, and great thrillers erupt from things like contract disputes, right?
Oh my goodness. No, yeah, this was a Selznick project, but he had been working on it with Hitchcock, and this was a story. Hitchcock wanted to do a story about confidence tricks on a grand scale with Ingrid Bergman as the woman. And he said her training would be as elaborate as the training of a Mata Hari. And so they started kind of developing this based on I think it was a story in, what was I can't remember what the story was. But they found a story in an old magazine. Oh, it's Saturday Evening Post. That's what it was. They found this story. And Hitchcock, I mean, really, there's not a lot of connection from that story. It's almost like you could have the same credit that we got last time with Spellbound, the inspired by or suggested by. Suggested by,
right.
Right. But so Hitchcock started working on this and was working on the script with Ben Hecht. And Selznick was just buried. He was really focused on a different project that he was working on at the time. And because that project was sucking up all of his time. I mean, it was just all of his time was going away. He was really not able to focus on Notorious. And he finally hit this point where just financially he wasn't able to do it anymore. And he said, you know what, I'm going to sell this to RKO just to get some quick cash, which he did. And it turned into an RKO project. And because of that, and now Selznick still had 50% of the profit share. He got paid handsomely for it, all of that sort of stuff. Because he still had 50%, he still felt like it was his right to write his memos, and he certainly did, and tried to get his hand in the casting and everywhere else he could. But this became the first film that Hitchcock really got to produce on his own in Hollywood. And it really ended up setting the stage for what a Hitchcock film would become and how they would be known. And I think that because of all of the way that this played out, there are just so many reasons why this became the Hitchcock film that really set the stage for what we're going to see from Hitchcock over the next couple decades.
The casting of this thing, when you talk about their Selznick-Hitchcock relationship, the casting, it sounds like, was, what's the word? Not easy?
Well, at least it was with Bergman. We know that because Hitchcock
was
wanted
a lock,
her,
right?
Yeah, and she was already under contract with Selznick, so she was on board pretty easily. Now, when he went over to RKO, Selznick, and I think initially, Cary Grant was. I think I don't know if he was Hitchcock's choice, but Hitchcock had worked with him before, and so I think there was an easy relationship there. However, Selznick really wanted Joseph Cotten to be cast, who had also worked with Hitchcock before. However, he was under contract with Selznick. And I think I can't remember what the whole thing was, but the atom bombs had just fallen. And so Selznick felt this whole MacGuffin of the uranium ore was very pertinent. And he wanted to make sure that this film was the first film that was out that dealt with atomic weaponry. And but Cary Grant wasn't available. And so that was his big reason to kind of quote push for Joseph Cotten, even though it was really just because it was his contract. Mm-hmm. But Hitchcock, this again, RKO now had it, and RKO's executive William Dozier, he kind of had a clause in the contract that said he can do what he wants, and Cary Grant was signed, and hallelujah. I think it was great that they were cast. Now Selznick did push for Claude Rains to play the heavy in this film. And luckily, it was something that Hitchcock was in favor with. Now, I think Hitchcock had wanted somebody else to come in instead to play the role. But, I think in this particular case, Selznick kind of managed to sell everybody. And it wasn't a hard twist of the arm. I think everybody was like, Claude Rains would be fine for this. And he ended up great. I mean, Claude Rains is so good in this film as the villain. I mean, just what an interesting sympathetic villain that we have here. I love the way that he plays. So I think this is just like really perfect casting from top to bottom.
Well, it really is. And you talk about Claude Rains as the sympathetic heavy, right? He is, he's absolutely that. And that is just furthers that whole statement on complexity. The world is complex. And that's the thing that this movie gets right above all else. When you walk away from this movie and you actually feel for their marriage, which is a sham, that is a triumph of this movie. It also lets us take a step back and talk about the kiss. The sexiest kiss since 50 Shades.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, the Cary Grant, Ingrid Bergman kiss. This was a controversial thing.
It's so funny, the production code and the rules that they had instilled. And there was this silly rule that a kiss couldn't last longer than 3 seconds.
Well, because everybody knows that after 3 seconds, you get pregnant.
That's exactly what it is. It's just a bananas sort of thing. And so Hitchcock wanted to kind of push the boundaries with that kiss. And so what he did is he devised an entire scene between Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman where they were having a conversation, but they kissed through the entire conversation, which is about 2.5 minutes long. And what he did is every 3 seconds, so basically they're kissing, but every 3 seconds he wanted to make sure that they interrupted the kiss to get some words out. And so it starts on the balcony. This is when they're down in Rio. It starts on the balcony and they're kissing and they're talking and they're kissing and they're talking. And then they keep kissing and talking as they walk into the house and then walk to the door. And the whole thing kind of plays out that way. And it's funny because the stars, both Bergman and Grant, both said it felt strange, it felt awkward, nothing felt normal. And Hitchcock said, don't worry, it'll look right on the screen. And it does. It works so well. It's really sexy. The way that it plays out, it's like this really kind of intense, just you can feel this erotic love between these two. They just cannot stop kissing, but they have this conversation. And I don't know. I found it to be such a fascinating way to direct this scene. I didn't know at the time when I was watching it about the production code, but reading about it afterward, I'm like, oh, okay. So that's an interesting way to play the scene so that they could have a lot more kissing on screen. And it works. It is really effective. It brings this kind of erotic passion out in their relationship. And he fought against the production code and got it through. Really interesting.
It is interesting. It is unfortunate that he was wrong and that she did get pregnant. This is wildly underreported. It turns out the Hays Code was right all along, and we all suffer for it today.
She should have known better. Oh, that's the next movie we're talking about, Pete.
That's right. That's right. We got to talk. We've got to talk a little bit about how novel use, shall we say, of camera.
Well, we've already talked about the POV stuff, and I think that is very important in the novel use of camera. But something else that Hitchcock does here is he has this beautiful, beautiful shot that starts. It's at the party. This is about midway through the film. This is a party at Claude Rains' house, and everybody's there. It's a big night, and the kind of start of the party begins really up high above the crowds and everything. And then we boom down all the way from this wide high shot all the way down. We keep going down, 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 down. We see Ingrid Bergman and we're going down, down, down. We're going right to her back as she's kind of looking around watching people. And the camera goes right up to her hands. So it goes to this extreme close-up of her hands as you see this key that she's holding in her hand and kind of rolling around nervously in her hands. This Unica key, which is kind of a key plot point. It is a beautiful shot. It actually reminds me quite a bit. Everybody talks about kind of the strength of this shot, but I feel like Hitchcock had already been playing around with shots like this. You could see it in, I believe, Young and Innocent, which has another name. Both names for that film are just terrible, terrible names. Young and Innocent is such a dumb name, but it's another one where you can
find the font Young and Innocent on defont.com.
Right. But Young and Innocent has a similar thing where you're going through a party and it's the couple and they're looking for a particular person, and the camera moves through this crowd of people and it goes to an extreme close-up of the drummer, and then it goes right up to his eyes, and you see him blinking his eyes madly, which is kind of this nervous twitch that he has, and that's the clue that they're looking for. So it's a technique that Hitchcock had played around with before, but even then it was not as effective as it is here. It's just flawless in the way that he executes this from such a high angle all the way down. And again, Hitchcock is a director who really likes his high angles. And you're going to see that in much later Hitchcock films like North by Northwest, where he really kind of plays that director as God, high angle types of shots, which he really does like to employ. And here you get this. It really feels that way, where the director as God is kind of descending from on high just to kind of show us, the audience, this plot element. Beautifully done.
It is beautifully done, and even more so when you think about the technical accomplishment of actually doing this. Have you ever used a non-reflex camera?
I have not.
I have not either. And it's stunning to me to think about that because, I spend a lot of time behind my DSLR, right? The single lens reflex camera. And I spend exactly 0% of that time behind the camera thinking about what DSLR actually means, that single lens reflex camera, because I don't need to worry about that, because grandfathers and grandfathers before them have actually solved this problem. But what Hitchcock was dealing with at this point, and what Ted Tetzlaff, director of photography, were dealing with at this point, is the fact that the lens is put in such a way on the camera that is separate from the viewfinder. So you look through the viewfinder and you get a rough idea of what you're shooting at. And then when you're ready to shoot, you've moved the viewfinder out of the way and it puts the lens in front of the film. So everything is off, right? And that creates a parallax, right? It's a parallax to what between what you see and what you're actually shooting. And then you run the shot, right? You have no idea while you are shooting if you are shooting what you need to shoot, because everything, particularly from a high angle, everything is going to be off by some percentage of what you thought it was going to be in the frame. So,
especially when you even get closer. It's
exactly.
Because then you have to make sure, okay, well, by the time we get to our hand, we need to be like, I don't know, an inch off or however far it is.
Exactly. And you can kind of tell when they do that, because when it gets close to it, you can kind of tell the camera starts to adjust. It starts to pull back as they actually realize, oh, we're getting actually close to the key. Let's go ahead and pull over to the right so that we land on the key. But it is a stunning shot. And I watched that shot and I started looking at what they were doing here on these reflex or non-reflex cameras. And I wanted to hug a cameraman, because this is...
Just go find one on the street.
I'm telling you, I was full of love for the whole industry, because this is magic. The problems that they were able to solve and the shot that they were able to accomplish on a moving non-reflex camera is wizardry.
This is something we've talked about, like in films that we've looked at in the past from these decades, where it's an era of this exploration with these tools. And when we were talking about, I can't remember which one was it. I'm blanking on which one it was. It was one of John Huston's films, but just looking at how they were using the dolly in complex locations and how they were able to kind of pull off some of these shots that they did at the time on location. It was like incredibly complex, and they were like figuring it out on the fly. And that's exactly what they're doing here. It's so much work in order to accomplish what they're doing, yet they're doing it, and they're creating really magical moments in these films that by today's standards, I mean, this sort of shot, it's like I could probably get it, just by, going out with a drone and just kind of get a shot of a drone coming down, and the camera, the lenses and the film or the digital technologies and everything, you don't have to worry about the focus and everything, and it's cake. At the time, like a shot like this is seriously complex, and the fact that Hitchcock had it in mind and was able to describe it to his team and get them to accomplish it with all the actors and everybody hitting their marks and everything. I mean, it's really remarkable.
It is remarkable. It is the equivalent of, like, I don't know, the long shots in, Casino or Following Roller Girl. I mean, the number of pieces that have to be in place to make this shot work, and the sheer just blind luck of being able to shoot it and develop it and see what you got and have it be what you intended it to be is it's fantastic.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. Tetzlaff, his cinematography throughout this film, I think it's an interesting film because the bulk of it takes place in Brazil, yet the entire thing, other than plates, was shot on stages in Hollywood. I think the only exterior that they actually shot was the horseback riding scene when they force kind of her to kind of bump into Sebastian so that they can meet, and everything else was just all plates, which I find really intriguing. But in that context, they do a great job of creating this world where everything works and everything looks good. And I think Tetzlaff's photography throughout the film, he does a great job. It works really nicely to kind of create this noirish crime thriller look. It's nicely done.
Before we leave, let's talk about Mom.
Oh, Mother. Yeah, this was a beginning of a situation for Hitchcock that would pop up in his films a lot more later on. I think it's a theme that became pretty prominent for Hitchcock. His own mother had died a few years before. This is really the first time when he's brought his own personal mother issues into kind of the film, and this domineering mother, this emasculating woman who really is controlling of Alex, and the way that she kind of pushes him to start poisoning Alicia. all of that stuff. It's an interesting, dark character. And we're going to see mother issues popping up in Psycho, in trying to remember what else. There's a mother in North by Northwest, The Birds. It's just something that is very much something that is a figure in Hitchcock's films, dealing with kind of his own relationship issues that he had with his own mother. And I think that the way that we have this performance here by Leopoldine Constantine, she's great. I mean, she's really interesting. This is her only English film that she had done. She was, I believe, a German star up through kind of like the war and everything, and just didn't get many parts after that. And then she was referred to Hitchcock by, I don't remember who, because he had been looking for other people to play her, and brought her in. And boy, I just think that she does a great job of playing this dark character. I loved her in the film.
You're absolutely right, though. I mean, it's surprising to see her coming off of this film and having 3 listed TV credits on IMDb after this film. This is her last feature film.
Right, yeah.
It does remind me a little bit, though. It's hard to watch her performance here and not think a little bit of Cloris Leachman. Am I alone? You don't get any Frau Blücher?
It's funny. I didn't think that at all. What I actually thought of, weirdly, but tying into Gaslight, was Angela Lansbury from The Manchurian Candidate.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because, again, a really domineering mother, and that's totally where I went with it. But it's funny that you say that, because yours probably makes more sense, at least look-wise.
Yeah. We got to talk about music, Andy. This is, your favorite Roy Webb. I know you're a big Roy Webb head.
The Webb head. Oh, good old Roy. I actually really do enjoy Roy Webb he's one of those composers who I think he was a studio staple. Yes. I don't think he was necessarily known for, being, just a great composer or anything like that. But I do think that his music in this particular film really captured just everything that Hitchcock needed. It's just a beautiful score. It allows the kind of the mystery and the suspense and everything and the romance to kind of all blend together, play well. We've talked about him a little bit on Out of the Past, maybe the only time.
Well, he's one of those guys that, you look at his credits, he wrote a boatload of stock music from 1930 to 1960, and he is uncredited on all of these things until now, posthumously, and it's just his stuff was used in these movies. I actually found this movie and this music to be an exceptional relief after the good score wrong movie last week.
Great score.
Exactly. It's a great score. I totally agree. You're right. I'm underselling how great that score is. Bad movie pairing. This, I feel like, worked really well for me. I did not have any of those sort of jarring moments with this movie. I quite enjoyed it.
No, it works beautifully. And this was one of those things where, again, Hitchcock was pushing to get Bernard Herrmann, but he was still unavailable. And Roy Webb, who, he was a fan of Herrmann's anyway. He came on board he was the RKO staff composer, which is why he came on board. He had been doing a lot of stuff with Val Lewton's projects. And so, I think the darkness and the tone worked really well. And it sounds like, from what I've read, it sounds like neither he nor Hitchcock had much affection for Selznick and kind of the way that Selznick would push them to do things. And Webb and Hitchcock had a great time coming up with the different themes for this. No big love themes, no kind of cliches that fit anywhere. They just really liked working together. And I tell you, it may not be up there with Psycho or North by Northwest or some of those scores, but I think this is really just a beautiful Hitchcock score. And I think there's a lot of great pieces throughout. So it's definitely one to remember.
Let me just ask you this, Andy. On the remakes, did they use the Notorious font?
I didn't check, but if they did, they really screwed things up. No, this is really interesting. And I don't know if this falls under remakes or just interesting facts and tidbits, but okay. So first of all, the Saturday Evening Post story that this was suggested by, we're saying, there's another silent film actually from 1927 called Convoy that was actually based on the story. So I'm curious now to kind of check that out and see how it might compare to this one. There was a remake of this in 92. It was a TV movie. None of the people involved are familiar at all. So I just don't think it's one of those things that really gained any traction at all. What's interesting, though, is that this story, because and honestly, I really believe it's because it has such an interesting psychological exploration of these characters. It's become something that people kind of use to infuse in their own films. This is a really interesting one, Pete. Star Wars, The Clone Wars, Pete. The TV show, the animated TV show. Yes. Star Wars, The Clone Wars. Season 2, there's an episode called Senate Spy. And they do like an almost line-for-line adaptation of this at some points. And even the final frame of the episode is framed the same way as the final frame is done in this film. It's thematically done very similarly.
Now,
likewise,
have you watched this recently? Because I know, weren't you doing the Clone Wars?
I was doing the Clone Wars. I got up into season 5 and then it disappeared from Netflix. So I've been unable to, and I wasn't unable to return to check it out because of that as well. So I really would have loved to, but weirdly, that like as soon as I read the plot synopsis of that episode, I'm like, I totally remember that. I know exactly what they're talking about. So it is exactly what they did. And so it's interesting. And likewise, Mission Impossible 2.
Yeah.
And now it's a virus. It's not uranium, but they even included some dialogue from Notorious in that film. That's how much the homage was that they were doing. So yeah, it's an interesting element to kind of throw into other projects. I find it to be intriguing. Yeah,
that's just crazy. That's great. I love it.
Yeah.
How to do it awards season. I hope it won all the awards, Andy.
I'd like to say this did win all the awards, Pete.
I would like it. Can we just pretend that you did?
Yeah, right. For the Academy Awards, it had 3 wins, 3 other nominations. Again, for the time, it's pretty good, you know. At the Oscars, Claude Rains was, of course, nominated for Best Actor in a Supporting Role, as well he should have been. And Ben Hecht was nominated for Best Original Screenplay. You know, that's great. I think both of them deserve those nominations. When you look at what they lost against, though, let's see. Well, I can understand it. Claude Rains lost his performance to Harold Russell in The Best Years of Our Lives. And that's a tricky one because Harold Russell, you know, he had gone through a lot of the stuff that his character did, losing an arm and all that sort of stuff. I guess I can see why maybe that would be an okay win. As for Ben Hecht, he lost to The Seventh Veil, which I am just not even familiar with. So I can't even tell you what I think of that as a choice. This is the synopsis of The Seventh Veil. One dark summer night, Francesca Cunningham, a once world-famed pianist, escapes from her hospital room and tries to commit suicide by jumping off a local bridge. She is rescued and taken back to the hospital and undergoes psychological treatment by Dr. Larson. Larson desperately wanted to know the events and persons who drove her to this state and help her. He makes Francesca talk about her past, a past with a controlling guardian, Nicholas. No friends, kept apart from the man she loved and forced to practice the piano 5 to 6 hours a day.
Well,
from that,
right.
I'd pick this film.
Yeah.
Jeez. Oh, let's see. Over at okay, so I don't understand what these awards are, but there are some awards called the Bambi Awards. Have you ever heard of the Bambi Awards?
Only that time Bambi went up against Godzilla.
Right. No, actually, the Bambi Awards are a German award. It is a German media award. And this is an award. Weirdly, the statue looks like Bambi, Pete. So You're not
in the pre-Godzilla or post-Godzilla state?
The pre-Godzilla.
Okay.
Yeah. But I guess this may show to like how long this film was playing around the world. 1952, so basically a full 5 years later, or 6 years later, really, Ingrid Bergman won Best International Actress for her performance in this film.
Oh.
At the Cannes Film Festival, Alfred Hitchcock was nominated for the grand prize of the festival, did not win. So it's, it's one of those films. Didn't really take home much, but man, it's a film that sticks with you though, isn't it?
God, it really is. It really is. I found this film just delightful to watch. And maybe it was, giving water to me after spending time in the desert. I don't know, but it was really fun. I hope it ages well. It was a great watch. And what's even better about it, I will just say, if you haven't seen the movie, probably should have led with this. It is, it's fallen into the public domain. So even though you can find it, you should go get the Criterion Collection Blu-ray if you can. But you can also watch it on YouTube, and you should, because it's probably not going anywhere, in spite of takedown notices elsewhere. They're not going to get this one.
They're not going to take this from me.
Kappa.
Yeah. Although, yeah, look for as nice a copy as you can find though, because it's a good one. It's a beautiful image. If
you have an old Palm Trio, you should try to watch it on that screen. That's a 320 by
wow.
what? To 160? You should try and watch it there. It'll be a hit. And if you could do it in a bathroom stall, you should do that. How did it do at the box office?
Well, Hitchcock's budget dropped from the $1.5 million he had for Spellbound to just $1 million for Notorious. I'm assuming that was the transition from Selznick to RKO. That is about $12.3 million in today's dollars for this one. No idea why the reduction, but like last time, perhaps he just needed a good Salvador Dali dream sequence that really would have given RKO the motivation to give him more money. The movie did open, it premiered August 15th, 1946 in New York. I couldn't find the actual release date, but that's when it premiered. It was a hit. This became the 8th most popular film of the year, earning $24.5 million domestically, which is about $465.7 million in today's dollars. That puts this film at an adjusted profit per finished minute of almost $4.5 million, a solid success for old Hitch. Unfortunately, and not to put too big a sense of foreboding on things, but it would be the last hit film that Bergman would have in over 10 years.
Okay, here's what we need, Salvador. When the wine bottle breaks, we're going to need everybody to go into a uranium-induced fugue state for 27 minutes. Can you do that for us?
I want to see that now.
Yeah, I'd show up for that. Sure.
Maybe I don't.
The movie's already over 2 hours, right? I mean, why not?
Oh, geez.
I think it's time for us to rank it.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. You can see all the movies we've talked about on this very show. If you swipe over in your show notes and tap the word Flickchart, if it's a link there, it'll take you exactly to this movie on Flickchart, where you can add it to your list and see how it stacks up to ours.
First up, we have Notorious, and this is so fitting, Pete. Notorious or Spellbound?
I'd like to open the bidding with Notorious, please, Andy.
100% Notorious. Notorious or Fargo?
Very curious where you're going to land on this. In fact, I'll begin holding my breath.
I'm going to go with Fargo.
I'm going to go with Notorious.
Hey, wow. I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
I'm still not changing my vote, but still.
Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Paper.
Rock.
Wow.
Oh. Notorious takes it.
Sweet, sweet victory.
That's good. Notorious or Creed? Here.
I think I'll probably go with Notorious.
Creed is awfully good.
It is awfully good. And I'm a big fan.
But I think I'm going with Notorious too.
I don't need to tell you, this movie performed pretty well on my own flick chart. Spoiler.
Okay. Notorious or All the President's Men, Pete?
All the President's Men, Andy. You shut your mouth.
weirdly, I feel like I might go with Notorious here.
What? I'm sorry. Who is this? What podcast is this?
But I'm okay giving you all the President's
No.
Men.
Hey, it's a principled fight. Let's do it.
No,
you picked already.
Late.
1,
too late.
2,
Nope, too late.
3, paper.
All the President's Men.
Okay, All the President's Men beats paper again.
Notorious or Nine Queens. Wow, haven't seen that pop up in forever.
Wow.
And that's a really good one.
Yeah. Notorious.
Nine Queens.
1, 2, 3, scissors. Oh, well.
All right, ready?
Okay.
1,
2, 3, scissors.
Scissors.
Crush you.
Notorious wins. Notorious or Brazil? I'm going to Brazil, Pete.
I will go to Brazil with you, Andy.
Weirdly, Notorious takes place in Brazil.
See, we all win.
That's right. Notorious or Old Boy? Here I'm going Notorious.
Notorious.
Notorious or Gaslight? Oh, I love these Ingrid Bergman matchups. I have to go Gaslight, though.
Seriously?
No. Ooh. Man, this is hard.
I love Gaslight for what it was and what it represents, but as movie to movie, having just watched them side by side, I'm Notorious.
I'm pretty wishy-washy here, so I feel like I should give it to you because I really could go either way.
Okay.
I feel like I want to say Gaslight, but then when I say that, I say I want to go Notorious, and then when I say that, I want to go Gaslight. So I'll never be able to.
You should just put a fork in it. Yeah.
All right, Notorious or Casino Royale? I got to go Casino Royale.
Okay. All right, I agree.
I love that you are having such difficulties with this, though.
Yeah.
This is exciting.
I've had a hard time.
Yeah. Notorious landed one spot above Gaslight. It landed at spot 33, bumping Gaslight down to 34. I think that's a great spot for Notorious. 33 out of 406. That is a 92% on our chart.
That's fantastic. How did it do on yours?
It wasn't quite as high, but still really high. It was 462 out of 4149, which is an 89% on my chart.
That's so funny. As much as I feel like I even came to the defense of this movie a couple of times there, I still ended up higher on yours. It's 159 out of 1,089. That's an 85. And I don't know why. What are you going to do? I don't know. Flick chart. But I will tell you, if I go by the algorithm here, it tells me I should be putting this as a 4.5 stars elsewhere. I'm not going to do that. It's going to be a 5-star for me over on letterboxd.com/thenextreel. What about you?
Yeah, this is a straight up 5-star film. This film, I hadn't seen it in a while. I was looking forward to revisiting this in my Hitchcock series that I'm doing. And but I don't remember I don't remember having quite as much a spell over me in the past, but wow, I just was like right there with it. And at the end, when he goes in and picks her up and carries her out, I was just like on pins and needles watching. Just beautifully done. Yeah, absolute 5-star with a heart.
God, we didn't even talk about that shot, Andy. That last sequence is amazing. Yeah. It is so ridiculously patient. It is such a struggle to watch him carry. And the way they stick with those tight shots, face to face to face to face to face, is it's edge of your seat stuff, and it's so stupid simple. The architecture of that scene is so simple, and he just wrenches every single drop of angst out of it. It's incredible.
Especially because the way that Claude Rains is, he is so nervous because he legitimately loved her. And that's what I found so interesting about his character. Like, he legitimately loved her, and then he was totally stabbed in the back, which is great to see how that played out. But then to have all of this complexity with her getting poisoned and everything, and now Cary Grant is taking her out of his house with all of these German people downstairs as they're watching, and he's like, what am I going to do? Should I go out with them? Or should I, as if we're going to the doctor? It was beautifully done. It's such a this is a great example of a psychological like climax. Like there's so much intensity here, and all you have is a guy carrying a woman
downstairs.
Out of a house.
Yeah, that's all it is. And that Claude Rains has to turn around and go back. It is. Yeah. It's just like ripping your heart out of your chest.
With the door closing at the end.
Oh, it's amazing. Man. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Eat dirt,
Good
Jon
stuff.
Snow. Okay. So here's the thing. It is now ranked, and we're 5 stars with a heart. And now we're done for a little bit with this movie. We're going to move on to another Bergman. Where do we go from here?
We are jumping forward a couple of years. We're going to 1950. This is going to be an interesting kind of next step for our conversation about Ingrid Bergman as an actress. We are leaving kind of this Hollywood period. She does more films between 1946 when she did this and 1950 when she does Stromboli, which is our next film. But there is this kind of this period that she does in Italy, and it'll be interesting. We'll talk about this more next week as she kind of goes through this Italian period of her career when she's making films over there. And starting with this film, Stromboli from 1950, directed by Roberto Rossellini.
Now, I've not seen this movie.
I haven't either. Criterion did release, I think it's 3 of the 5 films that Rossellini and Bergman did together over in Italy. I think it's a 3-pack that they put out. I'm really curious because, and actually I picked it up from the library just the other day. They actually, for Stromboli, they actually have 2 versions, the English version and the Italian version, and they're different lengths. So if I have time, I'm going to try to watch both versions so that I can really kind of wrap my head around this project.
Well, let me tell you what I'm struggling with. That for all these years, I have thought of Stromboli. I always thought it was an Italian, like, kitchen comedy.
Well, because of the food?
Yeah. I've just always assumed I'll get around to it one day. It'll be a fun kind of family movie night, like of watching period movies. And it takes place probably in a kitchen. It's like Chef, but in Italy, and with Bergman, and it'll be great. It doesn't look as funny.
No. This is Italian neorealism. Yeah, this might be our first delve into kind of that neorealism sense of filmmaking. So, at least with the Italian neorealists.
So
in the
delightful.
50s, so, yeah.
Get ready. It's a ride.
Well, if you want to hear more of us, but you can't wait until next week's show, check out our other show, The Marvel Movie Minute.
We're talking about the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. We started with 2008's Iron Man, and now really is the sweet spot. If you haven't started that show, you should start now. We're weeks away from finishing this first movie as I am talking to you right now. And so by the time you catch up to present, you'll be done.
And you'll be ready.
It's the ultimate perfect binge, and you'll be caught up with everybody else. This is the sweet spot right now. Don't miss your opportunity.
You can support that show and all of our other shows over on thenextreel.com/Patreon, where you can get access to our exclusive members-only weekend show, The Saturday Matinee.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon sometimes doeth.
Amazon half doeth. We split the vote today, Andy. I'm a regular dangling Chad.
That's what I've always called you, Pete.
I went with a Common Sense Media because I was just, first of all, curious. Have any kids seen this movie? Andy, a kid has seen this movie.
One kid. And you have the proof.
I have the on the internet proof that a child has seen Notorious and gives it a 5-star review.
Wow.
I want to hang with this child. Are you ready?
I cannot wait. Pins and needles over here.
The mysterious movie that is Notorious still shines today. Notorious is a shockingly spine-tingling take on World War II. It stars Ingrid Bergman as Alicia Huberman, an amazing female character. This movie was so great, it's not iffy at all, but I rated it age 11 and up because it's pretty slow in the beginning and not many kids will probably like the first half hour. That all being said, now I can talk about the good parts. Notorious is about Alicia, who has been hired by America to spy on a Nazi leader in Brazil. It's so good, and the ending is even better. Everyone should see Notorious. This movie contains positive role models, but also drinking, drugs, and smoking. And that kid, Andy, is 11 years old.
They're like, me and above can watch this movie.
That's right.
Or at least won't be bored by this
That's
movie.
right. That's right.
I now wish that I had watched it with my own daughter.
You should have watched it with your daughter.
Yeah, absolutely should have.
All right. What do you got?
Well, Pete, I did not go to the kids. I did not go that route. Instead, I said, you know what? There has to be somebody over on Amazon who gave me a 1-star review that I could really bring to people, because we love this movie. We like to go opposite. So I found a 1-star that I think is a good example of people's opinions as to why they don't.
Is it
like
about
this
the
movie.
packaging? Are they complaining about the packaging?
It is not about the packaging, but there's plenty. This is a 1-star review by Joshua Mitchell, who says, I don't remember Mr. Grant playing an overweight, vulgar rapper. Received the rapper biopic instead of the classic. So disappointing. This was bought through a private seller and does not reflect on Amazon or the greatness of the original film of the same title.
That's
so
true.
clearly, this is not the biopic for the Notorious B.I.G., but now we know.
For anybody who was actually secretly hoping that Biggie Smalls actually played the Cary Grant role in his own film, that's not that movie either.
Man. Although now I'm very curious about people who pick this up thinking this is the biopic.
Right?
It's like, I didn't know he's been alive that long. He was around when there were Nazis.
Oh, man. Good stuff. Thanks, Amazon. It is hard to believe that we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
So many great movies, so many great conversations. But it's a lot of work. Producing this show week after week does require a lot behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
We had some great films in Season 8 that started their lives as books or plays, and you can find all of them on our Originals page at thenextreel.com/originals.
That's the site where listeners can find links to purchase all the source material behind the adapted films we covered, from Season 1 up through our current season.
For part of Season 8, we had a series celebrating the 50th anniversary of films from 1968.
We talked about 2001 and 2010 for our Odyssey series, both adapted from Arthur C. Clarke's novels. Man, the second one was so much better than the first, right?
Don't you even get me started. Need I bring up Under the Cherry Moon again?
Yes, also so much better.
Wait, no, that's not what I...
Planet of the Apes kicked off its series based on the novel by Pierre Boulet.
We covered Danger Diabolic and The Detective, adapted from novels for our 1968 crime films.
Wait, wasn't that The Detective the prequel to Die Hard?
They were both written by Roderick Thorpe, and yes, it's the same character in the books.
I can't believe they even asked Sinatra if he'd be in Die Hard. That would have been weird.
Once Upon a Time in America was part of our Leone Once Upon a Time trilogy, adapted from Harry Gray's novel.
And we looked at 1968 Best Picture nominees The Lion in Winter, Rachel, Romeo and Juliet, and Oliver!
We also had an Ingrid Bergman series with adaptations like Spellbound, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Murder on the Orient Express, and Gaslight.
We haven't talked about Gaslight.
Stop gaslighting me!
Dive deeper into these books and more adapted films at thenextreel.com/originals. Every purchase supports the podcast.
Get the full list of adaptations that we've covered on all the Next Reel family of podcasts, and start your next read today at thenextreel.com/originals.